Hi, everyone. My name is Kamen Redfield, and our presentation is on the exploratory data analysis of federal criminal sentencing in marijuana cases. Can the other group members introduce themselves, please, with Wendy first?
Okay, hello, I'm Wendy and I'm a first year data science major.
My name is Andrew. I'm a fourth-year data science major.
Hi, I'm Min, and I'm a first-year transfer data science major.
I should also mention that I'm a fourth-year data science and linguistics major. Okay. This is going to be the general outline of our presentation today for reference. We're going to go over the data set, the research question, the data cleaning and preparation we did, talk about the confounding variables, conduct a hypothesis test, an analysis of race, ethnicity, and region, and talk about the significance of our findings and our next steps. So the dataset series was called the Monitoring of Federal Criminal Sentences, distributed by the Inter-University Consortium for Political and Social Research, the ICPSR, and it was produced by the United States Sentencing Commission. The link to the dataset source is in the slide. This dataset series contained information about federal criminal cases sentenced under the guidelines of the Sentencing Reform Act of 1984 and contained data from starting in 1987 to 2016. The dataset was very large and had about 215,000 rows and 549 columns pre-data cleaning. For this project, we only used data from 2014 to 2016. This is because the data from before 2013 was not given as tab-separated value files, and they were given as different file types. And it would have taken us a lot of time to convert these files into data frames. So we focused on the data that was readily available to analyze. And each row represents an individual case. There are four main groups of variables in the data set, with the most important variables of those groups being listed in parentheses. The four groups were sentencing variables, instant and prior offenses, drug and chemical related variables, and defendant and court characteristic variables. The new race variable that was you see at the bottom was a combination of both race and ethnicity. There were four categories, which are white, Black, Hispanic, and other. And that's just something important to keep in mind because during the presentation, we'll use the column name new race a lot. And it's just important to know that's actually a combination of race and ethnicity. So our project goal and research question that we came up with were, does race and ethnicity affect the sentence duration of marijuana-related cases? And also, how does location affect the sentence duration of cases? In these slides you see from the American Civil Liberties Union, we see that half of drug busts are for marijuana, and that some races are more likely to be arrested for having marijuana. And so specifically, our group wanted to see if the given sentences are also different with respect to race and ethnicity. For data cleaning, we narrowed down to 94 columns from the 549, and we took only rows including cases with marijuana, which brought us to about 18,000 rows. It includes both large-scale drug busts and also small marijuana possession cases. There was about 3% missingness in the new race column, which was removed because without the race, we can't really run our analysis. So that was about 600 rows that were taken out. In the data frame shown below, you'll see a lot of variables, many of which we don't end up using in our analysis, but stuff that we would look into if we continued our project. For example, the DA from 1 to 3 columns and the WGT 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. columns. These all correspond to the weight and types of drugs, things like that. And the key variables I listed on the right side, which are sentence total, length in months, the new race column, and the district column.
So before we began further analysis, we wanted to determine if and to what extent the confounding variables could affect our results. And so the first variable that we wanted to look into was whether or not the defendant's criminal past had an effect on sentencing time. And so our initial hypothesis was that people with a criminal history would get higher sentences. But as you can see from the diagram, the results actually said otherwise, and people with no criminal past ended up having a higher average sentencing time than those without. But despite this difference, we didn't think it was significant enough to narrow our data set into only those without a past, since we just lacked enough observations. The second confounding factor could be the age. And so similar to the criminal history, we wanted to see if there was an effect of age on the sentencing time. And from our graph, we noticed there was a very minor correlation between the two. And so we did the Pearson correlation coefficient, and that essentially just affirmed that belief. And thus we determined it wasn't necessary to account for age either when conducting further analysis.
And here we look at the mean and the median sentence for each race over 50 states. We look at the median because we have a lot of outliers. So we want to look at them both mean and median to have a good graphs of the length of sentence. For white, we have a 19 months, the mean, and 14 months as median. And for black, we have both 26 months for mean and median. And for Hispanic, we have 37 months and 36 months for mean and median. And for other races, we have 27 months and 15 months, respectively.
So we wanted to conduct a hypothesis test between the population means. Our null hypothesis would be the mean sentence length for each race / ethnicity is equal, with the alternative hypothesis being the opposite, which is that the mean sentence length for each race / ethnicity is not equal. But unfortunately, we couldn't run a one-way ANOVA test because there are certain assumptions that need to be met to run an ANOVA test. One of them being that each sample is from a normally distributed population. And as you'll see from the histogram on the right, that the sentence length for Black people is not normally distributed, and neither is the sentence length for any of the races. And that's because the much lower sentence lengths are going to be much more frequent than the very high sentence lengths due to the nature of the data. So instead, we went with a Kruskal-Wallis H test. And this tests the null hypothesis that the population median of all the groups are equal. And it's a non-parametric version of the ANOVA test. And this basically gets around the fact that there's certain assumptions that we can't meet. So our new null hypothesis was that the median sentence length for each race / ethnicity is equal, with the new alternative hypothesis being the opposite, which is that the median sentence length for each race / ethnicity is not equal. We set a significance value of 0.05, and we got the results shown to the right. The H statistic is not really meaningful to us because it's hard to say exactly what that means as a number, but the p-value was 1.6 times 10 to the negative 32, which is very much smaller than the significance value we set. So we reject the null hypothesis in favor of the alternative hypothesis, which that the median sentence length for each population is not equal.
We noticed some limitations when we look into the visualization of counts of sentences by the variable new race. Specifically, we noticed that since we're only analyzing the cases related to Mariana, when we plot out the counts of how many cases we have for each new race category, we noticed that there are a lot more Hispanic cases than the other three categories. While this is also an interesting observation to look into, our dataset doesn't provide any means for us to understand why there are so many more Hispanic cases. Because there are less cases for Black, white, and other, we would expect for the three categories to have a much higher variance than Hispanic category. When we actually plot the different new race categories standard deviation, we found that the standard deviation of new race for Black and white are indeed relatively higher due to their low amount of cases, but other is not impacted as much when we observe similar standard deviation. This is a limitation because the high variance in the Black and white populations could lead to inaccurate results. For the ease of further analysis, we took the subset and labeled all districts, which were presented to us in numbers, and converted them into their corresponding state names. Then we decided to group by the district and new race columns to calculate mean and counts. Notice that some states have more new race categories than others. That's because there are no cases for the specific categories for that state. Since we have low counts when we group by district, we later decided to group by with regions as shown above, and we eventually decided to use median instead of mean as a measure to limit the effect of outliers. These are the visualization we were able to obtain by analyzing the median of new race versus sentence total by region. We observed that among the different regions, we can see variations among the distribution of new race versus sentence length. For example, the distribution for new race versus median sentence total presented from Rocky Mountain region is very different from that presented for the Southeast region. Or to be more specific, the Black median sentence length is a lot higher in the graph for Rocky Mountain region than that of the Southeast region. Within each region, we can also observe from the variation of median sentence total presented by different race that racial disparity happens within each region. For example, we can see from the Midwest region visualization that the median for Hispanic sentence total is higher than that of the Black, white, and the other. From these graphs, you can see that the Northeast region and the Pacific region have the most balanced median sentence length with respect to the new race columns. We notice some limitation even when we group by regions and observe the counts of new race. For example, we can see that for the Rocky Mountain region and Pacific region, there are very little cases for some of the groups, which would lead to outliers having more of an effect on the median results. Thus, some of the distribution of the graph on the last slide could be inaccurate or biased.
And here we look at the median sentence for white across 50 states. They have a median of 14 months and a max of 56 months. And Colorado is the state that has the highest sentence, and California is the lowest state. And here is the median for Black across 50 states. They have a median of 26 months with a max of 186. The two states that have the highest sentence are Georgia and Virginia, and Colorado is the lowest state. And then next we have a Hispanic. They have a median of 36 months with a max of 180. Utah is a state that has the highest sentence, and Kentucky is a state that has the lowest sentence. And last, we have the median sentence of other race. They have a median of 15 months and then a max of 156. Delaware is an outlier, very high compared to the other. And Utah is the lowest state.
So to sum things up, we found that there were clear differences between length distributions between the different races and ethnic groups. However, we wanted to note that we did have a lack of observations for Black, white, and other communities. Also, we noticed that regions treated racial subgroups differently, but again, we were limited in the amount of observations, so we want to take these results with a grain of salt. All in all, although we didn't get to fully answer the question at hand, we have a pretty strong foundation, and we just need to do more further analysis to better understand how race and ethnicity affect the sentence length. And so these are just some of the ideas that we had for further analysis. One of the main troubles we faced was a lack of observations, so we could include data from all years. A potential issue I can see with this though is like marijuana laws did change over time, so we would sort of have to account for that as well. But we can also, with the data from the different years, perform a time series analysis of sentence length given year. We can also factor in the weight of marijuana for the cases and dig into the sentence length in blue versus red states.
Thank you everyone for listening to our project that we have spent the quarter working on. We also want to give a very special thanks to our faculty mentors, Shannon Ellis and Alex Cloninger, for assisting us